During the lockdown in 2020, the Canadian Women's Foundation released a video on social media showing a hand gesture that would signal a need for help for people facing domestic abuse. You may remember this video.
Oh, can you share that banana bread recipe?
Oh, sure. It's actually my mom's banana bread recipe, but it's pretty foolproof and it's super easy.
Oh, well, I appreciate it. I know your mom is a great baker, so I should be good.
So there's the gesture there. This video went viral and helped save lives. And now that movement has led to the creation of a podcast series. The series is called Signal for Help. It is focused on survivors and supporting victims of gender-based violence. Joining us this morning with more on the initiative and the podcast is Andrea Gunraj from the Canadian Women's Foundation. Welcome. Good to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me.
When we talk about gender-based violence, what does that mean exactly?
Well, it's things like intimate partner abuse, sexual assault, emotional abuse, the kinds of violence that women and girls and gender diverse people tend to be at highest risk of experiencing. Often happens behind closed doors between people who know each other. And it's many forms of this violence is against the law. Now, we may not know this, but it's so common. 44% of women in Canada experience some form of this violence in their lifetimes. And we know that some are at an even greater risk. That includes women with disabilities, Indigenous women, women living in the North. It's a huge issue, and it really does touch everybody. 67% of people in Canada know a woman who's been abused in her life.
That's an incredibly high number. Also a high number is the fact that, 40% of people now know this gesture.
Absolutely.
This video went viral, that hand gesture, the signal for help. It saved a teenager in North Carolina. I wanted to know what your reaction was to that happening and when you first heard about that story.
Well, I was so sad to hear a young person went through such a dangerous situation. I was relieved to know that the signal for help helped her get the support she needed. But I was also amazed that somebody saw it, knew how to respond, and did it. I found it was absolutely heroic. It taught me that tragedies are never inevitable. We can do something about it, but we have to be ready to respond. Are we ready? And that's the question of the Signal for Help podcast.
And another way to connect with people and to communicate with people is this podcast, the Signal for Help podcast. Tell us about it.
Well, it's hosted by an award-winning journalist, Anne-Marie Mediwake, and she asks a very simple question. Would you know to respond to somebody who's being abused if they disclose to you? So we ask people who are experts in the field, we ask people who went through this violence themselves to ask this question, what they went through and what would have helped if people around them were helpful. Did they get the help that they need? And it's all about giving us tools, everyday people, to be able to respond to gender-based violence, be able to speak about what's often seen as unspoken and underspoken, and help us to be able to respond in a way that's kind and caring and survivor-centered.
And survivor-centered, that is the key for sure. There's so many courageous stories that are told through this podcast. Is there a particular story that stands out to you?
Well, for me, the one that I always think about is Eternity Martis. Eternity Martis, she's an award-winning journalist and writer in her own right. She speaks about being abused at a young age in a dating relationship. So it happened in her teenage years and extended into her young adulthood. It reminded me about the stories that are often even more hidden. Dating violence, it happens often between young people. And sometimes we think about people who are living together and that kind of violence, but it also happens for people who might be dating, might be just meeting up, might be friends, may be acquaintances. It just shows how diverse this violence really is and how we have to be ready to listen to somebody's experience and not judge or cast aspirations on
I want to ask you about that, be ready, and the tools for somebody to recognize if somebody is asking for help. What should somebody do?
That's a great question. I mean, it's most important to let that person lead and not try to solve it for them. I'm like that. I want to solve problems right away, but it's important to let them tell you what they need. Second thing, I think it's important to be non-judgmental. Don't ask, what did you do to make them mad? In fact, that makes things worse. Don't blame the victim. I think it's very important as well to be just open and patient. It takes a long time to come out of a dangerous situation. Be there along the way. Exercise your muscles of patience. And finally, know 2 or 3 places that somebody can go for help. That could be a crisis line, a shelter, a family service. You be a good support and referral source for that person. You're doing something that is so important that could change a life.
Andrea, thank you so much for being here today. We really, really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
I want to remind our viewers, you can listen to the Signal for Help podcast wherever you stream podcasts or head to CanadianWomen.org for more details. We'll be right back.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you liked this, be sure to subscribe here, or you can check out more Your Morning videos right here.